So in the last concept, we have studied about the selection statements. So we have studied the if, else if, and switch case statements, and we have studied these all the topics we have covered. So now let's we go to the about the looping statements, how the loop works, and how it has been worked, and we have to check whether how the loop is working and how many types of loops and everything we have to check. Why? Because the looping statements we are using in many ways. So we have to check carefully how whether the we are using the simple loops or for loops or label loops and how many types it has been divided and everything we have to check. So based on the looping statements, can create the many programs. So you are seeing about these looping statements, the looping statements diagram. So that is a illustration statements for loops. So this is a concept we are going to study now. So so by observing this diagram or on a flow chart, you can directly know that how the looping statement is working and types of loops and what all the loops we are going to construct the programs and the how these loops will work and everything we have to observe this. So why? Because this looping statement is somewhat important in everything. So let's have a slide information on the illustration statement for loops. So they are used to the looping statements. They are used to perform the repetitive task in a given program with a lesser line of code. But because the looping statements, so the looping statements use the less lines of code, but it executes the exact program and execute this exact output. So there are there are four types of loops. So one is the for loops. Here we have seen that for loops and in a while loop we will study and while loop and do while for each loop an advanced and unchanging loop. This is about the diagram. So about the loops. So loops is nothing but it is in a one complete cycle. You can observe here by seeing here itself. You can know that it is a complete cycle. Why? Because it starts from for loops and it goes and it ends from the loop. So why? Because by seeing diagram itself, we can know that it is in a complete cycle by saying this. So let's understand this loop for loops in a deep way. So let's go to the first loop of a simple for loop. So yeah, so there is a simple for loop. So about the simple for loop, we can observe that the we can initialize the variable, check the condition, repeat if the true, and increment or decrement the value. So there is the basic syntax of the simple for loop. So for loop, and I have discussed it before itself. Before program, we have discussed it. So about the for loops, so what is for loops? So there will be three conditions I said. One is the condition of the initialization, and one condition is the condition. So one is the condition, and one will be the decrement or increment, and there is a block. So there is the basic syntax. So there's an example of the simple for loop. About the examples, we'll study further modules. So let's say having a slight information on somewhat about the for loops, about the simple for loops. So I've discussed about this. So one complete execution cycle of a loop is called the iteration loop. So I have said before, it is a complete cycle. So it is a complete cycle for what? So complete cycle of a loop is called iteration. So the number of iteration of a loop depends on the condition of a loop because the n number of intersection. So loop depends on the condition of a loop. So why? Because it mostly depends on the loop. It exactly what the looping statements is which we are giving. It is based on that. So after that, for a loop is type of a loop which is used whenever the logical starts and logical ends with well defined. So we are defining the syntax. So when the program has to be start and when it has to be end, we are calling as a logical start. The logical is starting here, and it is ending with a logical. So this is about the simple loop. So there's a simple loop about. So when you go to the for each loop for each loop, so it is used to transport array or in a collection in Java. So what is here? So it is used to transverse array. It is used for the transverse of an array or a collection in Java. So it is easier to so it is easier to use than the simple for loop because we don't need to increment value and use the subscription notion. Because when you go to the array, we are using the subscriptions. You know, so I think you have studied. So we are using in an array, we are using the subscriptions before the array name or before the array name or after the array name. So it is it is easier than the simple loop. So here we can understand because than the simple loop it is easy because we are not at all incrementing the value and using the subscription notion. Is it? So this is about the slide or syntax. So for as well as a type of variable and array. So these different syntax you have to keep in your mind. So simple loop, what is the syntax and what is the for each loop syntax because every loop has a different types of syntax. While you are writing the program, you have to keep in your mind the which syntax we are following. So it is a important thing. So after that we will go to the label for loops. Label for loops. So we can have a label for each loop. So we can have a label name. We can give the label name for each for loop. It is useful if you it is useful if we have a nested for a loop so that we can break or continue of a specific for loop. So normally break and continue for the keywords. So I have discussed before itself. There are some of the keywords. So mostly used keywords or I think so mostly used keywords. Some of the keywords are there. We'll discuss about those keywords afterwards. So normally break and continue are the keywords as well as and continue. So and continues the innermost for loop only. So this is the basic syntax of an label for loop. Label for loop. So what is the label name? We are giving the label name and for loop we are going. So there will be a three statement. What is one is initialization, condition, and increment or decrement. So there is a basic example. So you can see the example how I have written. So there is a different way. So when I showing the example, then you can know about the which loop I am using. So now we will go to the simple while loop. Simple while loop. So while loop is used to illiterate a part of a program several times when the number of illustrations is not known. So because while loop is used for the illustration part of in a program, but several times when the number of illustrations is not known, the loop keeps on illustrating till the condition returns false value. So this is about the syntax for simple while loop. So while we are giving the condition here, the code to be executed is, and this is example about the simple while loop. This is about the simple while loop. So this is about the do while. Yes, let's we have a slide information on this. So if the number if the number of iteration is not fixed and you must not have to execute the loop at least once. A do while loop is used. A do while loop is used. So the Java do while loop is executed at least once because the condition is checked after loop body. So there is a basic syntax that is a do and while. So about the do and while, there is a syntax and there is an example we can observe that. So when you go to the jump statement, so there is a flow of in a jump statement. So you can see the jump statement how it performs. So this is about the jump statement flow diagram you are observing. So yeah, the condition we are giving the for loop condition. If the condition false, it directly comes to the condition within the loop. False statements. If the condition true, it directly executes. or else it checks. So when we are writing the if else statements, we have studied about the else part. It executes the true, and else part if not, it goes to the second loop and it checks the program whether the given statement is true or false. So here, if the condition is true, it will break here and it gives a output. Let's understand each each jump statement in detail. So after this, we'll see. We have seen about the jump. We have seen the jump. So let's go to the break. So what is break? So have a slide information on break. The Java break is used to break the loop or a switch statement. So it is the break the current flow of a program at a specific condition. In a case of an inner loop, it breaks only the inner loop. So here what the break statement, which is we are giving the break statement, it is used to break the loop or switch the statement. So the break statement currently flow the program currently flow of a program at a specified condition. It goes to the currently flowing of a conditional specified condition. In the case of inner loop, it breaks the only the inner loop. So while seeing the here, you can see the example. I have given the for loops condition and I have used the if statement. I have break the here. So I have given the system dot out dot println, that's I. Okay. So this is about the break. Let's go to the another one. So this is about the continuous statement. So let's have a slide information on continuous. The Java continuous the statement is used to continue the loop. So continue the statement when you're writing the program, we write we will write the continue keyword. The program when it is going to check the program, it will check again. It goes to the continue. So when you're writing else part, it will stop. It will stop about the else part and it will check the program whether if 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 statement is correct, it will execute the program if statement. If the if statement is gives the output else, it goes to the else part and it will check the else part and it gives the output whether it will check if condition is true or not. Again it goes to the checking for the else part which condition is true, and again it executes the program. So when you're writing the continue when you're writing the continue keyword, so what continue it's continues the program. If the if else part is when you're writing the if condition, if part is not satisfied, it goes to the else part. If the else part is not if else part is not if the else part is not satisfied, it directly again it goes to we are writing after else part we are writing the continue. Why? Because after else part again you comes to the continue statements and check the program whether the condition is true or not. To check that program, after that it gives the output. That's what we are using the continuous. So slight information we have know that about the it is a continue flow of a program and skip the remaining code as a specified condition we have discussed about. If the two conditions are not satisfied, it directly goes to the continuous keyword, and after continuous keywords we are given the statements, it will check the lines of a code whether the compiler is getting the correct method and correct equation in that, so it executes the program. So for that's what we are using the continue keyword for continue of a program. This is about the looping statements we have studied. So in a further modules we'll discuss about the basic programs on each looping statement.